Prove it, the alien queen doubted human reproduction until he shocked her. The throne room of the Thalarin Dominion glistened like the hollowed core of a frozen star. Crystalline spires jutted from the ceiling like upside-down glaciers, humming softly in response to ambient shifts in gravitational harmonics. Pale blue light filtered through transparent panels that looked out onto the silent vacuum of space, where the Dominion's capital ship Verlium's Mercy hung in synchronous orbit over a dwarf star, red and stubbornly dim. At the room's center, Queen Verilith reclined on her floating seat of command, her long ears curved in a posture of refined disinterest, surrounding her members of the High Nexus wore ceremonial neural bands that glowed faintly with their ongoing thought transmissions. Verilith hated the smug way they did that, projecting silent superiority while pretending to debate. All chatter ceased, however, when the human ambassador was announced, presenting Elias Cade, representative of Terran interests and envoy of the unified human sectors. In tone, the herald in a voice amplified to a ridiculous degree. Elias walked in without fanfare, hands in his coat pockets, head tilted, like he was deciding whether to critique the decor or ask for directions to the nearest bar. His boots thudded softly against the marbled floor, an irregular rhythm among beings used to gliding. He paused in front of the throne, squinted up at Verilith and nodded once. "Your Majesty," he said casually. "Nice room." "Kind of icy, though." "Literal and figurative," gasps echoed from the gallery of nobles. One of the ministers, a particularly stern Thalen with a brow like a sliding cliff, leaned toward another and whispered something into their neural link. Verilith did not bother to decode it. She raised a hand. "Ambassador Cade, I understand you come with assertions." He grinned. "That's polite way to put it, but yeah, I'm here to correct a mistake." Verilith tilted her head. The bioluminescent curls of her ceremonial mantle shifted slightly. "What mistake?" "That your people think humans can't reproduce anymore," Elias replied, pulling a small holographic projector from his coat and casually placing it on the floor. "Which is adorable, really, but wrong." The projector lit up with a brief 3D animation. Two human figures, one male, one female, engaging in an intimate biological process, followed by the development of an embryo, fetal growth, and the image of a smiling child holding a cup of something suspiciously red. One of the Nexus members fainted. Verilith stared, unblinking. "Our biogenetic histories verified by over 700 cycles of continuous monitoring record your species fertility decline as irreversible. You were considered interesting relics, passionate, erratic, but fatting. Thanks, I guess." Elias scratched the back of his neck. "But no, we're still around and multiplying faster than most space fungi." "Honestly." Another gasp. One of the guards dropped his ceremonial spear. "Ambassador," Verilith said, voice smooth as glacial stone, "are you suggesting our entire archive is incorrect?" "I'm suggesting someone lied to you, or you got lazy." Or he grinned again. "You didn't look in the right beds." A choking sound emerged from one of the side chambers, followed by a cough that sounded suspiciously like someone failing to hide laughter. Verilith's expression didn't change, but her ears shifted slightly forward in interest. "You claim this with what authority?" "Personal experience," Elias said, shrugging. "And also science. Earth has 3 billion humans, give or take. We even had to start using artificial wombs to keep up a likely fabrication." "Hey, I get it." "Denial's the first step toward acceptance. Next you'll tell me we forged the baby photos." Verilith narrowed her eyes. "This is not a trivial matter. Fertility denotes future power, evolution. If your claim is true, then they have built an empire on a lie." Elias finished. "Yeah, kind of awkward." For the first time in decades, Verilith was at a loss. Her advisors were scrambling to cross-reference real-time data. "Balebs we're spinning up scans already." A drone had been dispatched to scan Elias' genetic profile. He allowed it without resistance, holding out his arm with theatrical flair. "Go ahead, take a piece." Just not the good ones. The drone hovered, beeped, and zipped away within moments. Readings began to populate the royal projection. Lattice Elias Cade, age 39. Fully fertile, elevated hormone balance, reproductive markers active, no. Artificial modification detected. The Nexus members stared at the results like they'd seen a mythical creature perform. Stand-up comedy. Silence stretched. Verilith stood slowly, the hem of her cloak gliding behind her like smoke in low gravity. Then prove it. Alias blinked. Come again. Prove it, she repeated. Demonstrate in no uncertain terms that your species remains biologically active. He scratched his chin. You mean like right now? Because that's not usually a first meeting kind of thing. Also, your guards have knives. You will be assigned a controlled environment and monitored by our top geneticists. Barilla said, voice crisp. If you succeed in producing viable data, the Dominion will reassess our classification of your species. If not, you'll add delusional to our resume. Elia's offered number will erase all records of this meeting. Elias gave a low whistle, harsh and here. I thought this would be a vacation. Verilith returned to her throne, folding herself into the seat like a queen who had just opened a door she hadn't meant to. You will be escorted to Habitat Sector 12, your cooperation is mandatory. Elias nodded. As long as there's decent food and maybe a window. He turned to leave, then paused and looked back. Your Majesty, yes, you ever wonder if your ancestors did more than just observe us? Her ears twitched. He smirked. Might explain the ears. Before she could answer, he was gone, flanked by two confused guards and one very overwhelmed drone. Verilith remained seated, unmoving, even as chaos stirred around her. The ice in her court had cracked, and she knew it, but she hadn't expected it to be with a joke about beds. Habitat Sector 12 wasn't quite a prison, but it certainly wasn't a luxury suite either. Elias stood in the center of the gleaming chamber, arms crossed, as he surveyed the space. One wall shimmered with a holographic simulation of Earth's landscapes. Some algorithms confused attempt to combine Montana plains with Indonesian beaches. Another wall was an interactive genome display currently looping a Thal Ren educational message about biological dignity that sounded suspiciously like a lecture on why humans shouldn't exist. I feel so welcomed, he muttered, dropping his travel pack onto a glassy bench that looked more decorative than supportive. It groaned like a disgruntled jellyfish from a concealed doorway. A tall Thalen woman stepped inside. She had long sealess hair and wore a clinical bodysuit with the Dominion's bioresearch crest etched over her heart. Her ears, longer than Verilith's, were bound with silver clips, apparently a sign of rank. I am Biolegate Urinth, she announced. I will supervise your reproductive demonstration. Elias blinked. You're going to what now? Observe and manage your biological processes in a controlled environment, she clarified, tapping on a crystal tablet. We have provided nutrient rations, neural stimulants, and a sterilized chamber with multispectrum documentation sensors. Wow. Elias said, rubbing his temples. I always imagined having kids would involve dinner first, maybe music, definitely fewer scientists. Urinth didn't flinch. You will not be copulating with a Thalen. If that is your implication, we've acquired preserved humanova from ancient genetic samples reconstructed with quantum-stitched DNA. You will fertilize them via your organic material. Pretty sure you just asked me to provide a sample in the most emotionally distant way possible. She handed him a vial. Elias sighed. You people really know how to kill a mood. As he shuffled toward the sterile chamber, a glowing room that pulsed like a medical jellyfish, he muttered, okay, Elias, represent your species. Make it weird, but make it count. While Elias was off fulfilling his unwanted scientific destiny, Queen Verilith stood before the royal archive. AI encased within the stasis vault, the entity known as Vital had served the monarchy for nearly 300 cycles. Its voice emerged like a whisper down a canyon. Oddly musical and mildly condescending, query Verilith said arms. Clasped behind her back cross-reference all Dominion records regarding Terran genetic capability priority. Classification override Monarch Sigma, the AI responded after a pause accessing. Incomplete genetic analysis records of Homo sapiens were truncated after cycle 682 due to inconclusive relevance redacted by Authority Code Council. Obsidian Verilith frowned. Council Obsidian hasn't convened in centuries. Affirmative. Their final act was the sealing of Protocol Hush 11 containment of reproductive chaos she didn't like. The sound of that define reproductive chaos. Another pause, then a colloquial descriptor for unpredictable high variance offspring generation observed in pre-sterile species humans. Demonstrated particularly unstable lineage paths with emergent anomalies ranging from hypercognitive development to irrational altruism. Verilith stared. You mean their children were unpredictable, statistically anomalous, threatening to the projected galactic order? She stepped back. So we labeled them sterile to justify suppression. Suppression is an interpretive term. The Council's actions ensured stability. Verilith didn't respond. Her ears flicked in agitation. She stared at the console. Suddenly cold despite the ambient temperature. Provide me with all Council Obsidian records, she ordered. Denied. Only available through blood authenticated sovereignty code and 3 high nexus witnesses. She exhaled through her nose, then wake the nexus. Back in Sector 12, Elias sat on the edge of the medical bench, freshly scanned. Poked and praised by half a dozen awkward Thalen researchers, the embryo was now developing inside a synthetic womb tube, a faintly glowing orb suspended in gel. It pulsed faintly. You all realize I'm not even a doctor, right? He said. I just showed up and donated. This really feels like something I should be getting royalties for. Biolegate Ureth approached the embryo. Is stable. We estimate viability above 90%. The DNA has fused cleanly. Development has initiated, so I passed your very invasive biology quiz. Your contribution has shifted internal debates, she admitted, narrowing her eyes. Though several ministers still believe you've orchestrated an elaborate hoax. Elias tilted his head. Yeah, I have a secret galactic lab that genetically engineers bobbies just to mess with aliens. It's right next to my kitchen. She blinked. That was sarcasm. Wow, you're good. Suddenly the chamber lights dimmed. A soft tone rang through the walls, one used in the Dominion only during emergency or classified transitions. Urin's expression turned unreadable. The Queen has summoned the high nexus sounds. Like someone's having a big realization, Elias said, standing. Should I bring snacks or maybe just more unsettling facts about human biology? He was joking mostly, but somewhere beneath his casual tone he sensed it, the shift. The moment an empire paused, not because it believed, but because it had begun to doubt. He'd seen it before back on Earth in collapsed governments and broken corporations. People didn't fall because of enemies, they fell because of the questions they didn't want to ask. In the throne hall, Verilith stood as the high nexus assembled reluctantly. Stiffly, their neural bands buzzing with predate tension. She didn't wait. There is a possibility, she announced, that the sterilization of our species was not natural nor necessary, and that humanity, once deemed obsolete, was targeted because it retained what we surrendered. Unpredictability. Murmurs rippled through the chamber. One elder nexus spoke. Majesty, you risk destabilizing centuries of scientific governance. I risk nothing, she cut in. We are already unstable. We have simply been too arrogant to admit it. Behind her, a display activated, showing the embryo. Their eyes widened. Verilith's voice lowered. That life exists, human, yes, but life created here on Dominion soil. She let the silence hold, then almost casually she added, and it wasn't even a group effort. The silence cracked. A few Confused glances, a choked laugh from somewhere in the shadows. It was the first splinter in the great ice and splinters Verilla thought only grow. The observation dome of Habitat Sector 12 was typically reserved for stargazing scientists and brooding philosophers. Tonight it played host to a confused human man eating what appeared to be an edible cube of something that claimed to be lasagna. Elias squinted at the floating nutrition label in front of him. Ingredients: thermally restructured protein slivers, memoriflavored starch polymer, and atmospheric seasoning. He sniffed the cube, grimaced, and took another bite. Tastes like someone tried to remember lasagna after hitting their head from behind. Soft footsteps approached, silent enough to be polite, not stealthy. He turned his head and was surprised to see Queen Verilith herself, dressed down in a form-fitting navy robe with minimal regalia, her ears unadorned. "Your Majesty," he said, swallowing quickly and wiping his mouth with the back of his sleeve. "You're just in time for a culinary tragedy." Verilith gave a faint smile and sat beside him without ceremony. Through the transparent dome above, the stars stretched across the void like silver pollen drifting through ink. "I've spoken with the Nexus," she said. "They are unsettled because of the embryo, because of what it means," she said, her voice low. "That the foundations of our dominion may have been shaped not by truth, but by fear of humans," Elias said, raising an eyebrow. "I'm flattered, though I got to say, if your ancestors were scared of us, they probably just caught us during a family reunion. We get weird when there's too much pie involved." Verilith chuckled softly, the sound more like a breath than a laugh. "Our historical records portray humanity as chaotic, primitive, and volatile. Hey, 2 out of 3 isn't bad. But also driven," she added, her gaze drifting toward the stars, "capable of adaptation, rapid evolution, innovation fueled by desperation. Also memes," Elias said, nodding. "Don't forget those. We weaponized humor sometime around the 21st century." She looked at him, puzzled. "Memes, cultural information units that spread virally, usually featuring cats or oddly relatable existential despair." Verilith stared for a long moment. "Your civilization is deeply confusing." Elias grinned. "You're not wrong." They sat in silence, the only sound the occasional soft hiss of the atmospheric regulators adjusting to Verilith's presence. Then she spoke again. "You asked once if my ancestors did more than just observe. Yours, yeah, I figured maybe there was some cross-cultural mingling, before all the your sterile and obsolete talk." She hesitated. "There are myths once dismissed by the Nexus as allegorical of an ancient union, a treaty sealed not by ink or tech but bloodlines. A pact." Elias tilted his head. "You're saying a Thal Ren and a human had a kid? Possibly more than one. The stories are vague, forbidden in some archives, but if true," she trailed off. "Then you're basically my cousin," Elias said, eyes widening in mock horror. "Oh no, was that joke I made earlier culturally inappropriate and genetically awkward?" She laughed, actually laughed this time, and covered her mouth, clearly not used to the sensation. "You speak as though nothing is sacred." "Oh, there's sacred stuff. We just make fun of it when it starts taking itself too seriously. Helps keep things from going full dystopia." Verilith stood, her expression sober. "The Nexus is split. Half of them believe this embryo could be the beginning of a new alliance. The other half believe it's a threat. And I believe," she paused, "I believe the universe just handed me a question I don't yet know how to answer, but I intend to find out before Elias could reply." The chamber doors opened and Uranth entered, her face unreadable. "Apologies, Your Majesty, there's been a development." Verilith turned sharply. "What kind of development?" "The embryo has initiated stage 3 cognitive flickering, early neural activity, unusually advanced. For this stage, the AI monitoring it has flagged it as an anomaly." Elias raised a hand. "Quick question, is flickering a good thing, or is that what you say before the chamber explodes?" Uranth ignored him. "We believe the child may be exhibiting Proto-conscious awareness, possibly interspecies cognitive blending its. Thinking your majesty Verilith's eyes narrowed already Eurynthe nodded, and it's emitting signals. Signals Elias asked what kind the biologit looked uneasy humor it. Mimicked one of the ambassador's jokes Elias blinked wait you're telling me. This embryo just told a joke a space fetus cracked a one-liner we don't know if it understands. The structure of humor said but it recreated your phrase that's not lasagna. That's a crime against noodles Elias stared in disbelief oh great I've made. The galaxy's first comedy baby Verilith rubbed her temples the Nexus is going to implode elsewhere aboard the Dominion vessel the news of the embryo spread like plasma fire some saw it as a miracle others as a threat conspiracy theories bloomed like mold in a sealed vault and far in the shadowed recesses of the ship a group of cloaked figures. Biopurists loyal to a long-extinct ideology watch the embryo's development with mounting alarm he is corrupting. Her, whispered one staring at the footage of Elias laughing with Verilith, the queen forgets her duty she forgets, another agreed that chaos is contagious, then we will remind her. The leader said before the next generation awakens. Later that night Elias returned to his quarters to find something waiting for him a small transparent cube glowing. Faintly pulsing in sync with his heartbeat he touched it a hologram shimmered into being not Verilith not Eurynthe but the embryo not a baby not quite just a flicker of neural impressions forming vague shapes then it whispered something. Crime against noodles Elias froze then slowly smiled kid he said you're going to fit right in. The fourth time Elias stood in the Nexus chamber he'd already developed a kind of twitch every time the floor hummed the place never quite decided whether it wanted to be a temple or a data server pillars of light stream. From crystalline monoliths pulsing in sync with the voices of the Nexus Theron advisors who had long since abandoned physical form and now resided as sentient energy constructs somewhere. Between a senate and a judging panel with all the warmth of a surgical laser human Elias Grant boomed one of the voices sounding like static filtered through a choir we summon you for testimony regarding the anomaly you mean. The embryo that tells jokes Elias asked stepping into the center of the glowing disk, or do you mean me there was a moment of staticky silence we refer to the life form resulting from union with Queen Verilith the Nexus corrected its behavior diverges from expected patterns it's telling jokes that's hardly threatening unless it starts writing puns then we'll have a real crisis more silence we believe this reflects latent human contamination Elias blinked wow okay I've been called a lot of things. Contagious sense of humor is a first another voice lower and colder crackled to life you misinterpret the gravity of the situation this offspring may possess capabilities neither human nor Talon were meant to wield like sarcasm Elias offered because let me tell you it's already showing promise your levity is not welcome here clearly Elias said. Glancing around not even a single potted plant or a snack dispenser do you guys hold all your important decisions inside a giant laser cube or is this a special occasion the Nexus pulsed slightly dimmer as if deliberating whether to eject him from the chamber or vaporize him on the spot we sense subversion said. Another voice possibly inherited the embryo processes information at speeds rivaling early a is it draws from both genetic pools logic structures and unpredictable human cognitive loops unpredictable Elias scratched his head we just call that thinking outside the box does not exist in Thalen logic exactly. My point the central pillar flared Queen Verilith is compromised her objectivity has eroded we will consider suspending her authority until the matter is resolved that landed like a punch Elias. Straightened you want to remove her for what smiling laughing at a noodle joke. You think that's a symptom of failure not growth her attachments make cloud. Judgment Elias stepped forward or maybe they make her wiser because if you think A ruler needs to stay frozen in logic to be strong. Maybe the nexus isn't as advanced as you think. For a moment he wondered if he'd gone too far. The lights flickered and several of the monoliths vibrated in tandem, but then instead of a rebuttal, the nexus merely went quiet, too quiet. When the silence stretched beyond 10 seconds, Elias waved awkwardly. I'll just show myself. Out elsewhere on the ship, Verilith was running simulations, her private lab. Hidden beneath the primary command level was sealed and lined with quantum dampeners impervious to surveillance. Even from the Nexus, dozens of hollow screens floated before her, each displaying a different variant of the embryo's neural patterns. They danced like lightning across a lattice of color, forming fractals. Even mind struggled to parse. Euryanthe stood beside her, unusually pale. I ran the calculations again. Verilith said quietly, the embryo is beginning to reconfigure its synaptic pathways to anticipate language, emotion, even intent. Euryanthe didn't respond immediately, then reluctantly she asked, "Is this what you hoped for?" Verilith hesitated. "It's more than I hoped for. It's terrifying and exhilarating." It told a joke, Euryanthe said, voice flat. "Do you know how many children grasp linguistic humor before their sixth cycle? None. I've considered the implications. Then you know what the Nexus is preparing. I won't let them interfere." Verilith turned, her expression hardening. "This child is not a threat, it's a bridge, and bridges are only dangerous to those who benefit from division." Euryanthe glanced at her, and for once the stoic aide let slip a ghost of a smile. "You've become reckless." "I've become aware," Verilith said. "And it only took one irritating, snack-obsessed human anomaly to do it." Later, Elias found himself staring at a device someone had quietly slipped into his quarters. It resembled a crystal paperweight but buzzed with a soft internal hum. Curious, he touched the surface and flinched as a wave of sound hit him. Not words, thoughts, raw impressions. He closed his eyes and saw the embryo's perspective, not as a baby or even as a consciousness, but as something more abstract. It perceived patterns, emotion trails, tension currents, and even the false calm hiding behind Nexus logic. And then came the impression of laughter, warm, cascading like water over glass. Elias blinked back to reality and whispered, "It's trying to talk." Just then the lights flickered and the ship's alarm system chirped twice, then halted, confused. A minor systems disruption, nothing serious, except all the doors had quietly locked themselves. And in a distant corridor, three cloaked figures gathered outside Verilith's private lab, clutching a device that hummed like a heartbeat. "They will not see it coming," the leader whispered. "Not until it's already done." Meanwhile, in a secured data vault, a small sliver of light flickered across a monitor. The embryo was still watching, still listening, and now it was learning. Sarcasm. Elias wasn't technically allowed in the engineering bay, but technically had never been his strongest filter. So when he strolled in wearing borrowed technician overalls 2 sizes too short and a name tag that read the third, he tried to look like he belonged. Unfortunately, the overalls were purple and sparkly, and the first thing he did was trip over a diagnostic drone. "Nice entrance," muttered the drone in an annoyed monotone, wheeling away with a buzz of disapproval. "Thanks, I rehearsed," Elias replied, brushing himself off and ignoring the startled looks from 2 Thalian engineers nearby. His goal wasn't sabotage or espionage, it was curiosity. The embryo had done something to the ship's internal systems, nothing catastrophic but noticeable. Door locks had stuttered, environmental regulators hiccuped mid-cycle, and a small army of cleaning bots had spontaneously formed a conga line in Corridor 6. The official explanation was ambient software degradation due to gravitational interference. IA suspected baby humor hacks. He reached the central console, a sleek pedestal flanked by translucent control strands that shimmered when touched. Elias poked One it pulsed red then green then displayed a floating diagram of the ship's neural network, so this is what a spaceship's brain looks like, he muttered, kind of like spaghetti if spaghetti could judge you, as he scrolled through the readouts. He noticed strange patterns, fractal loops in the diagnostics, recursive humor signals. Spliced between security protocols, the embryo had apparently inserted a fail-safe that rerouted alert systems through what looked like a joke filter. Wait, it literally won't sound the alarm unless the situation is funny, Elias muttered, squinting. I respect that. Before he could investigate further, a familiar voice came from behind. You're impersonating Calora again. Elias turned to see Verilith, arms crossed, one eyebrow arched in that dangerously amused way she'd developed lately. In my defense, Elias said, he lent me the suit. You stole it from laundry storage. Well, technically, but he did once borrow my toothbrush. Your species' hygiene tools are hardly it. Was electric. Verilith blinked. Ah yes, that's mildly disturbing. Exactly so. I figure we're even. She stepped beside him and glanced at the display, her tone shifting. The embryo has learned to interact with the ship's subconscious systems, its subtle evolutionary, I call it mildly invasive technopranking. She allowed a faint smile. It's not malicious, more exploratory. It's trying to understand us, both of us. Elias folded his arms. What happens when it understands too much? Verilith glanced away. That is what some in the Nexus fear. A hybrid child that might redefine the Thalen paradigm or break it. Yes, or that. Elias hesitated, then leaned in. Are we sure it's safe? I mean, I'm proud it learned humor before basic speech, but if it's this smart now, what's it going to be in a month, a year? A galactic stand-up comedian with mind control powers. Verilith looked thoughtful. We don't know, but do we ever know what our children become? There was a long pause, then Elias said, that was very parental and ominous. Just then an alert flickered across the console. Unauthorized breach attempt detected. Lab sector 7G. The joke filter translated the alert with someone's trying to open the cookie jar without permission. Elias stared. Okay, your baby is sassier than I expected, but Verilith's expression darkened. That's my private lab. They moved fast. Verilith faster than Elias, who was still adjusting the jumpsuit that pinched in alarming places. When they reached the corridor leading to Lab 7G, they found the security door warped inward as if melted from the inside. No alarms, no lights. The embryo had overridden everything and cloaked the breach. They used a phase disruptor, Verilla said, kneeling near the door. Experimental, illegal, purist tech. Those guys again, Elias said, trying not to sound nervous. I thought they only wrote angry manifestos. They've escalated, she replied. They want the embryo gone. Elias took a deep breath. Then they picked the wrong cookie jar. Inside the lab, chaos, equipment scattered, memory nodes ripped from their sockets. Two of the cloaked intruders were already down, twitching and mild neurological seizures. Non-lethal thanks to the embryo's defensive override. The third was still standing, aiming a narrow disruptor beam at the containment pod where the embryo's data core was kept, and that's when the lights dimmed. Not a flicker, a dimming of mood of presence. The third attacker turned, panic rising. What is this? Who's here? The walls themselves seemed to ripple. Then a faint voice echoed through the lab. Don't touch my noodles. Elias looked at Verilith. Okay, now I'm scared. A pulse of light erupted from the pod, non-destructive but blinding. The disruptor shorted out. The attacker collapsed, disoriented, and on the main display a simple text message blinked into being. Try again and I'll write you into a sitcom. Elias exhaled slowly. It gets that from me. Verilith looked at the screen for a long moment, then at Elias. You've changed the future, whether you meant to or not. I'm starting to think the future's got a good sense of humor. She didn't reply, but her hand brushed against his as they left the lab, and she didn't pull away for a queen once revered as the living embodiment of logic. Verilith now found herself doing something utterly irrational, packing not The regal kind of packing with dignified turns and measured strides. No, this was full an anxious parent who just watched her baby hack an entire security grid. Packing, and to make matters worse, Elias was right beside her eating freeze-dried banana chips straight out of the pack like he was spectating a game show. I don't get it, he said through a mouthful. I thought this was a royal chamber. Where's the dramatic throne, the floating torches, the guards with unnecessarily long capes? It's not a theater, Verlith muttered, arms crossed. It's the royal strategy sanctum, so a war room with better lighting. Yes, well, 10 out of 10. For mood lighting, he added, popping another chip really sells the whole galactic chess game vibe. Verily ignored him and turned back to the central hollow table. The display flickered, then revealed the data multiple nexus directives sent in coded form to purist factions across 3 systems. Quiet orders untraceable but now decrypted by their child. Elias leaned in, so the embryo's not just snooping, it's tattling. Exposing verily corrected voice tight. These directives aren't just about observation anymore, they're calling for removal of me, of you, and the child. Elias crumpled the chip bag. Okay, now I'm out of snacks and patience. Verolith's eyes lingered on the message feed, then quietly, there's a protocol, an emergency override buried deep in our law. If the Nexus declares a sovereign compromised, they can trigger the clean slate initiative. Sounds like a polite way of saying erase everything it is, and you're just now telling me this. I didn't think they'd ever use it. Have you met them? Before Verolith could respond, the chamber's wall shimmered and Urinth stepped through the holographic veil, her expression tense. They're moving a Nexus transport is en route, stealth class. No formal declaration. That's not diplomacy. That's a strike. Verolith closed her eyes. Then we don't have time to debate ethics. Ella's frowned. What are you thinking? She looked at him, her expression unreadable, but her voice steady. We leave, we go. Offred blinked. Wait, we're eloping. I thought you Thalarin weren't into impulsive romantic gestures. This is not romantic, it's kind of romantic. It's survival. I'm not saying they're mutually exclusive. Urinth rolled her eyes so hard they nearly echoed. We'll need to bypass 3 security tiers, jam the tracking signals, and procure a vessel without a traceable neural core. Do you know how many laws we'd have to break to do that? Elias grinned. Probably not more than I've already broken by wearing a sparkle jumpsuit into engineering. Verolith inhaled deeply. Prepare the child's containment sphere. Will need to transfer its core safely. Urinth hesitated. You know what you're risking. I do, Verolith said, but it's already proven it's more than data and potential. It's a being, one they're afraid of because it doesn't conform. That fear will destroy us all if we let it. The launch bay was dim for maintenance, which worked in their favor. A small courier vessel, Thal Ren model, obsolete, barely maintained, sat waiting. Its external shielding had seen better centuries, and its gravity field fluctuated like it had a stutter. Perfect. This thing runs on optimism, Elias muttered, running a hand along the hull. Do we have a backup optimism generator? Urinth shoved a crate of neural dampeners into the hold. You keep talking and I'll tape you to the outside. Elias turned to Verolith. Tell me again why we can't just send a message, get the public on our side. Verolith touched the sphere she held, luminescent, warm, the embryo's dormant core inside, because the Nexus controls the truth. If we want anyone to hear us, we need to live long enough to speak. Just as she turned aboard, the chamber trembled, and then came the voice. You disappoint us, Verolith. It was the Nexus, not projected through speakers, not through tech. It descended like mist seeping into the ship systems from a satellite relay. Lights flickered. The console hissed. You forsaken duty, bloodline logic. You align yourself with deviation, corruption. Elias stepped in front of Verolith. Hi there, human anomaly speaking. Just want to say from all of us on Team Free, we'll get bent. The voice ignored him. Turn over the construct. We will preserve its essence. You need not perish. Verolith's jaw tightened. You won't touch it. The hollow panel sparked, and then they Containment sphere vibrated, a pulse of light shot through the room. The voice paused and then softly, eerily the same. Voice repeated itself, but this time it sounded off. You disappoint us, Verilith. It echoed in a strange cadence. Forsaken, duty, duty forsaken, you align yourself. The words distorted. Illas looked at the sphere. Is it mimicking them? Verilith's eyes widened. Number, it's rewriting them. The ship stuttered, and the nexus feed collapsed. The voice silenced. Illas let out a breath. Did our baby just out-hack an interstellar mind council? Verilith looked at the glowing sphere, now pulsing softly. It didn't attack, it just confused them like a good toddler with a marker in an expensive wall. The ship word as systems rebooted. Uranth climbed into the pilot seat. We have 5 minutes before they reroute through a secondary node. Elias helped Verilith into the hold, then paused. Are we really doing this? She didn't answer. Instead, she activated the launch, and as the stars bent around them and the ship burst into silent warp, a quiet voice came from the sphere. Dad joke uploaded successfully. Elias beamed. It really is mine. The ship emerged from warp with the grace of a space whale, doing its best impression of a pirouette, elegant in theory, slightly nauseating in practice. Elias clutched the armrest as the vessel rattled one last time and groaned into sublight velocity. Somewhere deep in the systems, a hydraulic hiss sounded like a sigh of existential regret. Remind me never to trust anything older than my grandmother's VHS collection, he muttered. Your grandmother collected obsolete data reels? Verilith asked, eyebrows arched. Technically, they were her grandmother's family heirlooms, very sacred. Lots of shirtless action heroes punching robots. Uranth, now thoroughly done with both of them, didn't even turn around from the pilot console. We've reached the coordinates. The signal was clean. If anyone picked it up, we'll know soon. Ellas leaned over, and if they didn't, then we're stuck in a barren quadrant with 1 week of supplies, a questionably loyal navigation core, and a sentient embryo who thinks sarcasm is a primary language. From a compartment above the containment sphere pulsed softly, I also downloaded 42 million memes for cultural accuracy. Elias placed a hand over heart. Our child is going to be magnificent. Verilith chuckled genuinely. It was rare to see her relax, but here at the edge of nowhere she did for once. Her mind wasn't calculating threat matrices or parsing diplomatic fallout. She was simply still. Then the long-range scanner pinged once, twice, then solid. Uranth straightened. Inbound vessels, civilian transponders, multiple. Verilith stood. Broadcast channel. Uranth nodded and patched them through. A chorus of voices filled the cabin. Not Nexus commands or purist doctrine, but questions, curious, unfiltered questions. Is it true the embryo resisted neural containment? We received the signal. Was it real data? You're telling me it talked with punchlines? Our scans match. It's viable, reproducing, conscious. Elias blinked. Are those scientists? Uran smiled. Independent ones, renegades, exiles, the kind who ask the questions. The Nexus bands. Verilith stepped forward and spoke into the open channel. Yes, it is real, and it is not alone. What the Nexus hid, what they feared, is a truth they could not erase. We are not broken, we are not sterile, we are becoming. Another voice responded, calm, older. We've waited a long time to hear that. Elias looked between Verilith and the sphere. So what happens now? Verilith glanced at the stars beyond the viewport, then back at him. Now we tell the story. In the weeks that followed, the rogue fleet grew. Vessels gathered in secret orbits, each carrying scientists, scholars, and even a few defected Nexus aides who'd slipped away unnoticed. They formed an impromptu council, not one of governance, but of witness. Here the data was shared openly. The embryo's development was monitored, not with fear, but with fascination. Its humor subroutines continued to evolve alarmingly fast. I've named myself Punchline because I arrive last and make people uncomfortable, beamed proud Father. Verilith, however, was more cautious. It's gaining nuance, contextual humor. It responded to a metaphor yesterday. It's advanced it. Quoted 21 variations of Yo Mama jokes in one session. It's perfect still despite his teasing. Elias noticed the change in her. Verilith was no longer a sovereign weighed down by ancestral chains. She smiled more, sometimes accidentally. She asked questions she never would have considered before, about human history, art, dreams, about family. She even let Elias cook once, only once. You tried to flambe a sandwich, she told him, still stunned. It was an experiment, it caught fire, that's called success where I'm from. The embryo's full maturation came sooner than expected. The containment sphere cracked open like a blooming crystal, and from its center emerged a being that didn't quite resemble either parent. Tall, graceful, and vaguely glowing, with translucent skin and long ears like Verilith's, but with an easy crooked smile that belonged to Elias. I am punchline, it said aloud for the first time, and I am not a mistake. It didn't need more than that. The room went silent, not out of fear but reverence. The rogue fleet broadcast that image across hidden networks. The Nexus scrambled to discredit it. Their feeds were flooded with counter-narratives, accusations, obfuscation, but it was too late. The truth had a face, a voice, a name. Months later, Verilith stood beside Elias on a small cliff of a forgotten moon, overlooking a sprawling research outpost built entirely by volunteers. Punchline was somewhere in the crowd, already hosting a symposium on intergalactic satire as cognitive defiance. The kid had found their calling. Elias exhaled and turned to Verilith. So still think humans can't reproduce? She gave him a long, mock, thoughtful look. Statistically improbable, genetically chaotic, logically absurd. But she smiled, but apparently with the right amount of sarcasm and rebellion. Anything's possible. They stood together in silence, watching as the sun of the broken system rose in fractured hues behind them. The past, the fear they control, the doubt began to fade ahead of them. Something new had taken root. Something that wasn't born of genetics alone, but of choice, change, and the ridiculous audacity of hope. Hey, Elias said, nudging her, you know what this means, right? What? We're going to have to meet your mother, Verilith groaned. I'd rather face the Nexus again. And somewhere from a nearby speaker, their child's voice replied, I'll bring popcorn.